3, 2, 1, go.
Well, welcome back, everybody. It's been quite a while. I was Vince Tato, but my real name is actually Sam.
Samuel Seitz.
Yeah, and I'm here with my
Jesse Seitz. We're using your whole name.
We're using my full name now.
We're being authentic.
We're being authentic. That's yeah. But I didn't know you were my mother, so.
No, but my full name is Joseph David Hoffman, but I go by Joe and not Shem Groby.
Yeah. So I just thought it had been quite a while since we actually did one of these, and I'm really excited to be back. I want to say this is the 9th or 10th one we did. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to arbitrarily call this season 2.
So welcome back,
yeah,
listeners.
Because it's been so long, I figured, it's been a while. So now that we're back, and hopefully we can do this a little more consistently, we'll just say this is season 2 as a definitive mark. So, So, Joe, what's been going on since I think the last one we did, you were in Illinois?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I missed the last episode because I was working on a farm. It was a farm camp in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. And I kind of went there on a whim. I had those Corona blues, just staying at home. And I was like, I got to do something. And I kept looking for some sort of opportunity, some sort of weird place to go. And I think it was a little self-serving, a little, I didn't have faith that God would bring me the right things where I was. But I think I learned a lot of good lessons when I was in Illinois. Learned how to change a tire on the side of the road in Ohio, which came in handy the other day when our friend needed to change his tire. And there you go. A lot of life experiences. And I moved here. So since the last episode, I moved in here with you and our other roommate.
Yeah, you weren't here. When did you move in? You moved in on August.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah.
A lot has happened.
A lot has happened, yeah. I got a job. And
you got a girlfriend.
I got a girlfriend. All in that, what was it, 2 months?
Yeah.
It's all been that 2 months.
Life has changed a lot.
So, yeah, it's all good things, all exciting things. And now we're here, and we have a very special guest here on our show. So,
everybody give a warm podcast welcome to Chords of Orion, a.k.a.
Mr. Bill Vencil.
Hello.
Hey, guys. How you doing? Well, I already know how you're doing. I heard the intro.
Yes, we know how you're doing, too. But,
Yeah.
But tell our listeners who you are and what you do.
So, yeah, thank you. So I am a musician, and I am not a 20-something musician. I've been around for a while, and I've got a YouTube channel called Chords of Orion. It's CHORDS, like guitar chords, and that YouTube channel is really all focused on ambient guitar. And I've got, I also record and release albums. So I've got I think I've got 10 albums on Spotify, Apple, and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I'm actually a part-time musician. But it's been a really interesting journey over the last 7 years or so for me as Chords of Orion.
Cool.
Wow. So you started your YouTube channel 7 years ago, you said?
Yeah, September 1st, 2013 was when I actually created the channel on YouTube, and I posted the first video a couple days later.
Wow.
So what was that first thing that made you say, I want to start a YouTube channel?
Yeah. What made me want to start a YouTube channel? So, yeah. So let me go back a little bit. I said I'm not in my 20s, I'm not in my 30s, I'm not in my 40s, I'm not in my 50s, I'm in my early 60s. So I hesitate to tell you guys that because now you're going to treat me differently like some old fart, but please don't do that.
Not at all.
No.
But no. I do actually have a significant experience with playing in bands and music over the years. And when I was your guys' age, college and then post-college age, I was playing in a band, wanted to be a full-time musician, and we made some pretty good strides towards that goal, but it ultimately didn't work out. And eventually, Sam, you mentioned you got a girlfriend. Well, some lovely young ladies entered the picture, and decisions had to be made, right? And ultimately, things like marriage and other things like that came along, so we did not become full-time musicians. And I, in particular, ended up getting married and having children, the typical U.S. kind of, story. And I had to put the music kind of on the side. I didn't stop playing guitar, but I stopped playing in a band. And when, so for many years, I just kind of focused on that. And then as we got into the 2008 to 2012 kind of range, I started thinking, if I don't ramp this up, I'm going to be too old to do anything. So I actually kind of reinvigorated my recording experience, kind of made the transition into digital recording from analog. I actually released an all-acoustic album, acoustic guitar with CDs and stuff in 2008. But in late 2012, I found an online music marketing course that was pretty cheap, and I decided to kind of buy it and go through it. And it really answered a lot of my questions about kind of taking what I was beginning to do again and extending it more. And one of the suggestions was to really kind of get involved in social media and or YouTube or other outlets like that. So that's sorry, I got a little bit long-winded there, but that's kind of how I got going with the YouTube channel. And originally it was just really kind of all about marketing or kind of providing marketing for the music itself.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that
started
pretty cool.
out as a thing.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I got started.
Huh.
Yeah. So what can you tell us about pre-YouTube Bill? Like, what was the kind of music that you played? What was the type of band you were in?
Right. Yeah, so what I did, I was the band I played in was an old school prog rock band. So if you think of
Pink
bands
Floyd,
like
Genesis?
Genesis from the mid 70s to about 1980 or so, actually from the early 70s to about the mid 70s. So that would be when Peter Gabriel was in the band. If you think about that kind of music, you think about old school King Crimson, other bands like Gentle Giant. Don't know if you guys are familiar with them. So a lot of the music was actually coming out of England. There was a couple of schools of progressive rock that kind of came out of England, and we were influenced by them musically. And then I think we took it in some different directions, but that was kind of the basic kind of influence. But yeah, so I would call it old school progressive rock. And we played in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. kind of area, kind of in that region.
Huh. Did you enjoy playing live more or recording?
In the old band days for me, we did a lot of both. So we actually purchased some recording equipment. I would call it semi-professional recording equipment, mixer, multi-track, reel-to-reel tape deck, microphones, etc. But we also played out a good bit too. So we had an early version of a home studio back in the late 70s through the 80s into about 1990 or so. So we did quite a bit of recording.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that the whole band thing becoming sort of a working musician never quite worked out. So like, what is that like? I always wondered that, musicians that try to do that and then it doesn't work out. How does that play
Oh
out?
yeah. For those of us who tried and failed.
Well, you've come back in a sort of a second life in a way, but
I did. Yeah, I have actually, which is pretty cool, and we can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. I don't know. For me, it was frustrating, but also for me, I had married my wife, who is still my wife, and it was really kind of a for me, it was kind of sitting down and thinking about what are the priorities in my life? What's really important to me? And the relationship that I had and still have with my wife is super, super important. So that obviously had to come before dreams of, hitting it big or whatever. Not that we were ever going to hit it big with progressive rock.
She could be like,
Yeah, I don't know about
Porcupine
that.
Tree or something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
Could be the next Porcupine Tree. Or are you a Porcupine Tree fan?
I've listened to them. I don't listen to them a whole lot, but yeah, I mean, we were way before them, those guys. But.
Yeah, no, quite clearly. Yeah, but that must have been interesting.
So did you have a backup plan the whole time you were pursuing your musical career? Did you have something in your back pocket, or like when you finally decided that music wasn't the career for you, what did you feel like? Oh no, like what am I going to do?
Yeah,
like my life is
like,
over, or like
yeah,
what was it like?
I was working part-time the entire time because we weren't making enough money to support ourselves. So basically, I transitioned from part-time to a full-time job, and for me, again, we're talking mid '80s, right? So a long time ago. So for me, it was working in kind of facilities management, if you want to call it that. And then I eventually transitioned because it was pretty easy to do at the time. I transitioned actually into IT related stuff. So, and that's continued on. I still have a full-time job. I'm an IT consultant. So I've been doing for the last, 35 years.
So, and when you say facilities management, what was that like in the 80s?
Oh, I eventually ended up at a large, I won't mention names, but I eventually ended up at a large university, working for the university and helping to manage, the plant, the facilities management, so all the buildings and carpenters, plumbers, all that good stuff.
Yep, we've got a lot of that at U Albany where
Yeah.
huge.
So actually, pretty boring stuff.
Oh, so do you now like take care of do you still work at that university?
No.
Before I ask this other question,
I'm a consultant.
So
I work for whoever's willing to pay the hourly rate.
okay, that's pretty cool. Do you enjoy that?
I do. I enjoy music more though.
Yes. So we've obviously talked about your life outside YouTube and all that. So what are your biggest inspirations? Your biggest, say, like, you're a guitarist, so like who's your guitar hero, I guess?
Guitar hero. So for me, so if you let me preface this by saying you got to remember I've been around for a while. So when we think about the topic of ambient guitar, right? So you guys are familiar with that term. Let me ask you, what does that mean?
What does ambient guitar mean?
Yeah. What does ambient
All right,
guitar
Sam,
mean?
What's your
I'm going to get back to me and my influences, but I want to ask you that first.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. To me, ambient guitar, when I think of it, I must immediately associate a lot of reverb, effects, delay, all that stuff that would create ambiance. I know I'm defining a word with the same word.
Right.
But it would create that. It creates space to fill, but it's musical space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
What about you, Joe?
I mean, to me, I would just say ambient music is often music with like less specific rhythm or meter is what I always think of. But I know it's a genre that can't really be defined by that, because I know a lot of my favorite songs by like Hammock. There's a band named Hammock that does some ambient music, but
Oh,
they
I love
also
Hammock. Yeah, they're great.
oh yeah, jeez, they use drums and rhythm a lot. But so it's like often that the echo, the reverb, sort of, it's a very big sound I think of. But
Okay. The reason why I asked the question is because you might be surprised about some of my influences. And I want to get back, if you guys are cool with it, I want to get back to what is ambient guitar, because I think it's an amorphous term that is, you guys are defining it, right? And you're having a little trouble defining it. I have trouble defining it too. But as I think about my influences, they're not all what you would call ambient guitar influences. So, as I kind of look back, some of my major influences, one of my major influences actually is a bluegrass guitarist. His name is Norman Blake. He's in the age range of my father, so as far as I know, he's still around, but he played for Johnny Cash way back in the day in the 1950s and all that stuff. But he's one of my major influences in terms of actually right-hand guitar picking techniques. So we have that. And then I would say Robert Fripp from King Crimson is a pretty big influence. I don't think my guitar technique is very much like his, but some of the ways he approached the guitar in terms of, I'll say, effects and techniques, I would say definitely influenced. Another guitar player would definitely be Steve Hackett, who is the original. Well, he wasn't the original. He was an early guitar player for the band Genesis back in the 70s into the early 80s. He, as we think about ambient guitar, to take your definition of reverb and delay and perhaps volume pedal, Steve Hackett really, I think, was a pioneer in terms of using volume pedal and the volume pedal to create really legato kind of lines. Another big influence for me, electric guitar wise, would be Alan Holdsworth, who is he passed away a few years ago, but he was a fusion/jazz guitar player that I think really, in my opinion, he was probably the most influential guitarist of the 20th century, electric guitarist. I don't think we can discount his influence at all. But in terms of, at least in the jazz fusion kind of realm, Michael Hedges, acoustic guitar. Alternate tuning. He was one of the early tapping guitarists with the two-handed tapping, and in my opinion, he did it. He died in the mid '90s in a car accident, unfortunately. But in my opinion, he still understood musically how that should work better than almost every guitarist that does two-handed tapping today.
Yeah, that's such a technique that's easy to. It's easy to turn into just a sort of a little thing that you do to impress girls.
Yeah. I think most So most guitarists that do the two-handed tapping and maybe the percussive effects on the body of the acoustic guitar, they're ultimately not very musical. So they have certain technical skill sets for actually being able to physically do that, and that actually is pretty impressive. But as I think about it from a musical perspective, typically the compositions are very simplistic, and from a compositional aspect, they're not really that great. So there's a couple of players that I think are better than others, but as we look back to one of the guys that really started the whole thing, he had a very deep compositional skill set and knowledge that he brought to the table that kind of informed his physical technique of tapping the guitar. So I don't want to...
One of the things that I was thinking of as you're talking about all these people and influences, specifically like acoustic guitar, is my dad, my Bill, is a huge fan of Phil Keaggy. I'm wondering if he ever had, because tapping, all sorts of percussive stuff.
Yeah, I was going to mention him. Phil Keaggy, when I was a kid, I remember there was an album that came out in the early 70s. It was not a Phil Keaggy solo album. It was with another band. And I remember hearing the song, the name of the song is called Come Into His Presence. And I remember the first time I heard it, I thought, what in the world is he doing? And what he was doing, and I actually have a YouTube video, I'll plug my YouTube video, showing the technique now. It took me a few years to find out, like reading old guitar player magazines and whatever, to find out what he was doing. But he was doing volume swells with his pinky finger on the volume control of a Gibson Les Paul, which has a specific wiring situation that allows you to create trumpet sounds with it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So yes, thank you for bringing that up, because he was actually very influential early on for me as a teenager, for sure.
Yeah. You just love when you, especially as a young person, when you see something that you just kind of like, wow, how did they do that? And you kind of want to do it yourself. You want to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting how certain people like latch on to different things they find interesting. For like a lot of like musicians I follow, like I personally like a lot of metal music. So like I hear like a lot of interviews with people. Yes,
it's all good.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people say like the first time they saw like Van Halen tapping, they were just like, wow, I have to do that. Like I need to learn how to do that. How on earth is he making that sound? So I think that's really interesting how you like heard Phil Keaggy and you were like, wow, how is he doing that? How is he making that sound? I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, those are some of my influences. Now, as you guys, do either of you guys play guitar? Or?
We both do.
We both do.
Both, okay. So, I think for all of us as musicians, the influences never stop, right? So I could go down through my whole life and I could tell you influences from the last year, you know what I mean? But I think as a musician, the most important influences probably occur earlier in your life as a musician versus later. The influences later are kind of more what I would call maybe icing on the cake, so to speak. Right? They may shift you or alter your course a little bit, but the foundational influences tend to be earlier on, I think.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Gotcha.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I do agree.
Yeah.
So now I believe we talked about your musical influences and kind of you as a person, but let's talk about ambient music.
Yes.
Let's get back to that.
We wanted to get back to the definition of ambient music.
Ambient music. So ambient music actually has its roots going back, a couple centuries at least. And so I think the original idea of ambient music was really to be background music. So music that blends into the background and is just kind of there as a kind of a wash, kind of behind what's ever going on. So in a way, it's kind of like elevator music.
Yeah. Spa music.
Yeah, spa music, or if you think about, think about heading out to your favorite restaurant, pre-COVID, of course, Think about heading out to your favorite restaurant and you're there with your family or friends or whomever, and you're all having a good time. Meanwhile, there's this kind of amorphous thing in the background that's just kind of filling space. That's really the original genesis of ambient music. And as we get into more modern times, I think some people will disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But one of the people that I really think of is Brian Eno, who did a watershed album called Music for Airports. And it was, you can kind of think of it as performance art in a way, but the idea was that this music would be installed into an airport. I don't even remember which one, so pick a big airport. And it would just be playing textural sounds in the background to kind of fill up the auditory space. And that's really kind of as we think about what the actual genre of ambient music, that's really what it is. The term ambient music, though, has been used in a lot of different ways, though. So who's in the middle there? That's Joe. So, Joe, you mentioned Hammock.
Yeah.
Great band. I love Hammock. There's some Hammock tunes that I listen to quite a bit that are very meaningful to me personally. But what I would say is that a lot of Hammock's music is not ambient music. It's really, I would say that it's post-rock music more than anything else.
Yeah.
Which is totally
You're right.
cool, you know what I mean? But if you think about if it's ambient music is background music, then a lot of it really isn't. A lot of Hammock's music, I don't think qualifies as ambient music. Now, I'm looking it up here, if you don't, hang on a sec here. So if we think about, since we're talking about a band we're both familiar with, if we think about Hammock's Sleepover series albums, are you familiar with those?
Not as much as like Departure Songs and some of the other stuff.
Oh, Departure Songs is an awesome album.
Yeah. But that one, now that you come to think of it, is more post-rock, almost like some of those weird...
I would agree. That is much more post-rock, but it's a fabulous album for sure.
Yeah.
But as I think about Hammock and kind of their dimension of where they go and where they delve into, the Sleepover series, there's two of them. Sleepover series volume 1 and 2, to me that's more ambient music because it's meant to be in the background, and they even say that about those albums.
Yeah, no, I do remember that you've some of their releases on Bandcamp that they even say like, oh, here's this more ambient project.
But, so
when you say like music for the background, I as a musician, you create your music and you it's a prize to you. It's something that you really value. So I'm just trying to see where you're at here when you say it's background music. Do you take your music and say, I really hope someone puts this on in the background and doesn't really pay attention to it? Or do you want people to truly listen to it or just put it in the background? I guess I'm asking what's your intention and how do you want ambient music to be used?
Well, I guess my question is, do I do ambient music?
Ooh.
To me, yeah, I'd say so.
I think some of my music is ambient, but maybe not all of it.
Yeah.
Your album Vision is one of my favorite albums.
Oh,
it is amazing.
well, thank you.
I personally like to actually listen to it. It's very musical.
Yeah.
In the sense that I can sense a melody, but there's also a lot of ambiance going on. So when I hear that, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I like to listen to this. I don't want to just keep it quiet in the background. So when you say it's like spa or elevator music, I don't envision you creating your music and then saying, I hope someone put this really low in an elevator. So I'm just trying to see
Well,
like your intention.
are you guys familiar with my second YouTube channel?
Yes, your long play video
Yeah,
or long play channels.
with the 8 hour long videos. Like as we
Hmm.
speak right now, there's a YouTube premiere going on of my 8 hour long video for today. And I do it as a premiere so people can chat, for the first playthrough of it. That music, I do definitely think of that as background music because I'm hoping that people will use it as they're studying or sleeping or whatever they might be doing.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
I know I have.
in my view, I think about how I interact with music in my career, for example. So I'm an IT consultant. I've spent many years coding, writing software. I love to listen to music when I write software. But what am I doing? My main activity is looking at the screen and writing code, but I've got headphones on and I've got music on in the background. So it's there, and if something sticks out, I'll stop and like, oh, what just happened?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And pay more attention to it. But it is kind of in the background. But to me, that doesn't devalue the music. It is what it is. And my desire is that people interact with the music in whatever way they find meaningful. If it's as background music, great. If they have their headphones on and they're totally focused on it, great.
Right, because it's ultimately art is defined by the listener. So, I mean, I was thinking about my dad once again, my Bill, who he's also a coder. I mean, since the '80s, and now he works as an engineer for a chip manufacturer. And
oh, cool!
He's always listening to music at work, and he's always telling me, I can only listen to instrumental music, but what he listens to is like jazz. So it's like sometimes I think about like if I was coding. If I listen to jazz, I'm just like all these little things going on, and on the melodies. Kind of jazz is defined by like the complex harmonies and melodies, and I don't know if I could sort of zone out with that, but he can. So if that works for him,
Yeah,
right. So does that make the music less important if somebody's zoning out but doing something else? I don't think it does.
Not at all.
Right?
No, that makes sense. I just find it so interesting how. I remember your latest album. Now I'm blanking on the name.
Anodyne or Rumination?
Anodyne. Yes, Anodyne. Your promotional video was, I believe you called it Ambient Music for the Soul. So in creating that, was your intention to soothe someone to sleep, or was your intention, as you said, like up to the listener to choose the interpretation?
I think it's up to the listener, but that being said, I did make that album. I did select songs that I had recorded over the last year or so, that some of which were parts and pieces of some of the longer form pieces on my second YouTube channel. And they were originally recorded with the idea that they would be more background. I also think that given all the craziness of 2020, I wanted to do a release that was really meant to be soothing. So that was kind of, whether somebody listens to it with full attention or if they put it on in the background, it's great. But I know for me that I find it, when I don't listen to my albums very often, but when I do listen to some of the tracks on that album, I do find it soothing. In particular, the last track, which is 30 plus minutes long, it's called Sleep, Sleep, Beauty, Bright. And that actually was a very significant, for me, that was a very significant evening when I recorded that piece. I played for about 45 minutes straight, and when I got done and listened to it, I basically thought, I'm not really sure how that happened. I think that must have been a gift that was given to me. And I'm a Christian, so I'm a person of faith. So a lot of my life is really focused around my view of who God is, and I really view that piece in particular as a gift, as it were, from heaven. And even now, when I listen to it now, I don't expect everybody to view it like that, but for me personally, that's the way I view it.
Yeah, I think we did want to kind of talk about faith because Sam and I are both believers in Christ as well, and I figured this it's an important part of our lives, and to talk to a musician who I don't know, just to talk to how do you sort of view that your musical work? Is it something that you feel that God has given you to sort of bless the world, or
Well, I guess another way of asking would be like, there are bands that are like, we are a Christian band, and we produce Christian music. But then there are other bands that we are musicians who happen to be Christians. So I guess, where do you fall?
It's a good way to put it.
If you give me two choices, that would be the latter. So my view is, I've talked about this some on my channel, in particular in some of the live streams I've done, but my view of the intersection of faith and art really comes from what I would say, the old school view of who we are as humans. So if we think about Genesis chapters 1 and 2, way back, at the beginning of the Bible, regardless, and there's a lot of different views now about, was it really 24/7? Who cares about that? I don't care about that. But what I do care about is what it says about how humans were created, and I do believe that we are created. We're not random chemicals. So there is meaning and purpose in our lives. 2, I believe that God created us in His image. So we're not, and that's not Gnostic. It's not other religions that believe we can become gods, but rather that we were created with characteristics that we share with God. One of those characteristics is creativity. We can't create from nothing like God did, but we can use the stuff He created to create. So as a musician, what am I doing? Well, I'm using sound waves to make something. So that's my view as a person of faith, is I have been endowed with creative abilities, and part of my purpose in life is to leverage those capabilities to create something. I would say to create something that's beautiful. Now, of course, we can define what beautiful is, but something that is beautiful, something that reflects God's image. So that's kind of where I come from. And actually, the band that I played in, that old school band, that's kind of the tactic we took. We typically played in bars and clubs. We didn't play in churches or anything like that. But there's a couple of foundational theologians that we read way back when, Francis Schaeffer and Hans Ruckmacher, who made some really good, they wrote some really good material about being Christians, and being a Christian and being an artist. And so we took that and kind of ran with it. And so our thought was, well, we should be as creative as possible no matter what. And so some of it worked out well, and some of it was a total flop. But I've kind of carried that forward in my life, is to try to be as creative as possible,
Mm-hmm.
within my means, within what I can do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing to hear your perspective on that. Something I was thinking about is so you mentioned that one song, "Sleep, Sleep, Beauty Bright." How you just sat down, and you just played, and you listened back, and you're like, "Wow, that was crazy." Um, so like, I guess for me, like as a musician, like you know about this when we were all on campus at UAlbany when coronavirus happened and they had to shut down, and we were all there, and it was really, really sad. It was actually just a really weird day.
Oh
The sky was,
yeah, I'm
gray,
sure.
and
Yeah.
I was actually driving here before I lived in this apartment because I had friends that lived here.
Oh yeah.
And we drove over, and it was just really weird and it was strange. And then I went back to my house and just like kind of like sat in my room, like what the heck. And I wrote a song called "Going Away to Home" about because they were leaving where they considered a home, go back to their other home. So that was kind of like the inspiration for me, and it's a very like sad musical.
It's good though.
Instrumental, which I actually never finished, so I should probably do
Gotta
that.
finish it.
You
all
got
that
to finish it,
say-
man.
I do need to finish that. Yes. All that to say, when you sit down to make a song, do you already have a name of the song in mind, or you already have an emotion you want to convey?
It depends. Sometimes I do have something in mind beforehand, but because of my musical background, I tend to be very improvisatory. I'll get that word out correctly. So in many cases, I'll come down here and you guys are looking at the back end of my ratty looking studio. I'll come
Not
down
ratty at all.
here. I'll come down here and just, I'll plug in and think I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll just go ahead and turn the camera on. I'll start recording the audio, and then I'll see what comes out. So as a matter of fact, I did that today. This afternoon, I took my, I have a small guitar synthesizer, MIDI guitar that can connect to my phone via Bluetooth. So I put that together and stuck it in a bag and grabbed my camera, and I walked down to the river that is near our house, set it up, and I had no idea what I was going to do, and I played something. And that'll be a video here coming up soon.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's very improvisatory, but sometimes I do have things in mind before I record. I don't always have the title in mind. A lot of times I'll go back. A lot of my titles come from poets. Sleep, Sleep, Beauty Bright is from William Blake. It's a poem of William Blake poem. So that was named after the fact. But in other cases, I'll think of a title and then record something to match it.
This is kind of a weird question, but I was just thinking about, you were talking about that session where you sat down and you played Sleep, Sleep, Beauty Bright, and you're, feeling like that's something that maybe wasn't you, maybe that was God, right? And that you're in that sort of zone. Have you ever been like interrupted where like someone just walks in and you're like in the middle of that and you just sort of look up? I know that's happened to me where I've been in the zone, but I'm wondering if you have any stories.
Yeah. Well, with around here, this studio's in the basement, and there's a refrigerator just off camera that you can't see, and occasionally I'll be playing something, and somebody will come down to get something out of the refrigerator. What are you doing? So.
Oh well.
But yeah, definitely. It definitely happens. But
Wow. So I'm imagining outside of your basement you have a little neon sign that says like recording in session or
Recording in progress.
I need one.
Should get one.
Yeah, upstairs.
And that reminds me actually of something for our listeners for this show. Maybe for anyone that hasn't heard Chords of Orion's music, could this be a good sort of section where we play a song for them? We'll put that in post, but I was thinking maybe we could play one of our favorite songs of yours, which would be "Oh Susanna."
Yes.
Oh yeah,
that is
feel
definitely-
free. Yeah.
I love that song.
So let's play this, and we'll put it in post. But here it is, guys. "Oh Susanna."
Boom.
and now it's done magically through the power of post editing.
There you go.
That was
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah, that whole album is just, at
So
least for me, when I have interacted with it, it's either I was like really stressed out. I remember recently I was very stressed out at my job, and I just like I was at my desk and I just like put it on and just kind of sat there and just like did my work. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. I'll be okay. I'm not gonna die.
So that album was a 10-week album, and it changed everything about the way I record and think about creating music. So I had started a YouTube channel, and as I mentioned, in September 2013, and the first things I posted were songs that I already had recorded. So I just kind of walked around and shot video, on my iPhone or whatever, and just slapped it on the audio and posted it up there. But by the end of the year, 2013, I was really thinking I want to do some new recording. And so I decided to challenge myself to do a 10-song album in 10 weeks where I would write and record the song, and then create a video that I could post on YouTube. Not a video of me playing, but just, like leaves floating around or whatever, you know what I mean? And then, but post that on YouTube, and then for 10 weeks do that, and then release the album after that. So that really changed everything for me, because I had never done that before in terms of creating a boundary around what I was doing. I gave myself artistic freedom, but I boxed it in. So what I decided to do, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this in 10 weeks, because many of the recordings that I did before that would take like months. I would start a recording and do a track and then let it sit for a month, come back to it, and and many of them never got done. I have tons of recordings that are not done. And I'm not going back to them because I don't want to go back to them now. But on that album, I decided I would do basically 3 tracks. One would be a drone, so some track of some kind of drone. Second track would be an acoustic guitar, and the third track would be an electric guitar. So basically 3 tracks. That was my goal. The other thing was that every song would be an old public domain folk song or hymn or something like that. So I didn't have to create the composition. The composition was already there, right? I would just rearrange it. So that's how I did it.
Huh. So what brought you to Oh Susanna? What brought you to Oh Susanna?
Well, it's a great song, for one thing.
Yes.
It's also the name of one of my children.
Oh.
And
Are the other ones jealous?
at the time, I'm not sure why. I had to go back and really think. I'm not sure why I picked it, but I might have heard an arrangement or something like that might have struck me at that point in time also.
Yeah. And that sounds like an interesting creative project. It sort of bound yourself. And you said that it sort of changed the way that you record. Do you mean that you find yourself limiting yourself in that way?
I do that.
To get out creative?
I do that all the time now. I don't try to do anything more elaborate than I can accomplish in a very short period of time. So I don't do 40, 50, 60 track arrangements, where you're recording all this stuff, I've got 20 tracks of guitar on here and things like that. I don't do anything
So cool.
like that. Because I know that if I go down that path, I will never finish. And that is more important than the arrangement or whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. You've heard the phrase, you've heard the phrase polishing a turd, right? Well, even if it's if
Yeah.
it's not a turd and it could be polished into something like truly amazing, if you never finish it, it's worth nothing. So
It'll
the,
remain a turd.
Yep.
yeah. So the simpler thing is better if you can finish it versus the more elaborate thing if you can't finish it.
It's a very good way of
Yeah,
looking at it.
That's very inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, I realize I'm not going to quit my job, right? I got a full-time job. It's not something I'm going to quit. So I have a limited amount of time. I have to do stuff that fits into that time. So there's no sense in trying to do something that doesn't fit into the time. Maybe later on, I'll have
Yeah, that's so cool because I feel like there's a lot of musicians that I know that I've heard of just being that they're very perfectionist, that they work on projects. I mean, I think of even metal bands like Tool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
You know about them that they took 10 years or something to release an album.
Yeah, they didn't release an album. For
Although
10
that was
years.
more legal battles, I think, to be fair to Tool.
Yeah, Maynard Keynes is being himself.
But anyways, I hear about the artists like that. Even some jazz artist, Jacob Collier, I'm a fan of. That he works on these tracks and he lets us in on the process sometimes with his followers. And he's looking at these Logic Pro projects that have literally hundreds
They're
of
so
tracks.
complex.
Oh, they're massive.
just
Yeah, right.
How does he do that? And how would you with unlimited time? And if that is your full-time job, it would almost be too many options and too much time to just keep on adding more stuff. So
Right.
it's kind of cool.
No, and I am not saying that artists shouldn't do that. Like,
No.
I'm a bit. When I was in college, I majored in music theory, so I listened to, and I still do. I listen to tons of classical music, and I love extremely complex orchestral arrangements. But I don't have the capacity to do that. I would love to do it, but I don't have the capacity. So for me, it's a choice of doing nothing or doing something. And doing something is better than doing nothing.
Amen.
Yeah, that's. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger said something is better than nothing.
Oh, did he? yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
He
Well,
did.
I mean, you could take it too far. You could, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
when
want to
you-
go there.
I'll talk
But
about-
doing some, If it's a choice between creating art that's a little more limited or not creating any art, I would prefer to create within my capabilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you talk about extremely complex orchestral music, one artist that comes to my mind is Devin Townsend. I know you've reviewed his effects unit.
Oh yeah, the Ocean Machine.
The Ocean Machine. Yeah. So when I think of extremely complex music, he has done stuff with orchestras. I don't know if you ever checked any of his stuff out, but it's very I don't know, you described it as really dramatic metal music. I don't know if you've ever checked any of that stuff out.
I was not familiar with Devin Townsend really until I heard about that pedal, and to be honest, I bought the pedal so I could do a YouTube video of it. But since then, I have listened to Devin Townsend. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of Devin Townsend, but I think he's a very talented musician. His vocal style is not my style, but he's an amazing vocalist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
the dude, it's like, wow, how can somebody sing like that? Again, it's not my preferred style, but I respect the talent that he has for that, for sure. But I mean, he's a good example of somebody kind of off in the metal direction that does more orchestral kind of arrangements. For
he does
me,
ambient music too.
for me personally, I'm thinking more of what you would call full-on classical music kind of arrangements. When I think of that, that's what I think of. But yeah,
So when you listen to classical music and you said you enjoy that complicated, classical stuff, just a really good composition. What's some of your favorites for the listeners? What is Chords of Orion listening to?
in terms of classical music, so
Yeah.
I would say one of my main influences on classical music that I would say influences what I do now is Charles Ives. So he was an American composer who he was born in I think about 1874, died in the late 50s, if I recall, mid 50s. And his period of composition was from about 1880 to about 1920. And a lot of his music, I would say, has qualities that you might call ambient in nature. But he was very influential, was not popular when he was alive. He was one of those guys that became more known after he died or towards the very end of his life. But very influential for more modern 20th century, quote, classical music, if you want to use that term.
Very interesting.
Bach is obviously, how could we not have Bach, right? So
Of course.
I also am a big fan of Renaissance music, which is kind of the genre or the era before Bach, before Baroque. Aaron Copland is another 20th century composer that I really love. As I think about more modern composers that maybe have more directly influenced what you might call ambient music, Philip Glass comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm influenced by him necessarily in what I do, but I certainly very much enjoy his music and what he's done in his career.
One of the pieces that I think about when I think about classical and ambient music, sort of those two, is it's called Electric Counterpoint by Steve Reich, I believe.
Oh, Steve Reich's another good minimalist
Oh,
composer, yeah.
So good. And just those elements of, like, when I listen to it, I hear he has that music theory knowledge in the background to make these sort of interesting things, but it can fade into the background and give you that ambient thing. And sometimes I studied to it, and sometimes you just listen to it and like, wow, this is amazing. So.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah. So, now your band, I'm imagining, I haven't actually listened to it. I did try to find it, though.
Tetelestai?
Tetelestai.
Yeah.
Tetelestai.
Tetelestai.
How ambient was your playing? So the way I picture it is, if you're in a full band, it's hard to be an ambient guitarist. So I guess this is a two-part question. What was your playing style? And then once you reignited your music career, what made you say, you know what, I'm going to be an ambient guitarist now?
I think there's a lot of elements of what I do now and what I did then. To me, it's a progression. I've always been drawn to, if we're not using the term ambient music, but if we're using the generic term ambient guitar, which I think is more a marketing term than anything else. If we think about that, I have always been drawn to that since I was a young person. So, delays, my first volume pedal I got in 1977, maybe, long time ago. My first EBO, which I use a lot on my channel and my music. The first EBO I got was 1978. My first guitar synthesizer was 1978 or 79. That was all, I was college age then, so I was pretty young at that point. So I've always been drawn, I've always been drawn to that kind of stuff.
Wow. I think that's super, super interesting how you transition from the prog rock band, and you're full blown, ambient guitarist. Just you and your music.
I actually never heard the phrase ambient guitar till about 2012. I was like, oh, ambient guitar, what is that? So I listened and it was like, oh, I've been doing this for 35 years. Oh, cool.
Wow.
So the thing is, if you think about younger players, one influential younger player is Andy Othling, Lowercase Noises. You guys familiar with
I
him?
think I've heard the name. I don't think I've listened to the music.
I'll have to check him out.
He's his YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel. It's about the same size as mine, and he's been very successful as a younger person in terms of leveraging what he does into a full-time career. So kudos for him. I think it's amazing and awesome. But and he definitely falls into that quote ambient guitar kind of realm. But as you listen to his music, what you can tell from him, and if you ever listen to him talk, you'll hear that his influences are more modern than mine, obviously, because he's younger than me. So I think a lot of ambient guitarists today are really more coming from the post-rock kind of direction, versus me coming from old school prog rock. So neither is better. I mean, it's just a difference, right? So I think my sensibility is my musical sensibilities are a little bit different. Again, it's not a question of which is better. It's just a difference.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's definitely what makes your music unique as one element of that.
Right,
What
yeah.
you bring to the ambient guitar
exactly.
world.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why I say, since we talked about Hammock, that's why I say a lot of what they do isn't ambient, it's more post-rock.
Right.
Which is totally cool. I mean, I think they blow it out of the water.
Yeah.
It's great.
They're pretty great. Yeah.
So, as you think about that, I really, to be honest, I really dislike trying to categorize music.
Yeah.
I just like to enjoy it for what it is without trying to put a name on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been really awesome.
Yeah. Jeez. So much to talk about. We could go on for 3 more hours.
I could go on. For
Yeah, you guys get me.
hours,
It's like the you ever watch The Incredibles?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
The bad guy in The Incredibles. At the end, he says to the Incredible family, he says, "You guys got me monologuing."
You guys got me monologuing.
Yeah. You got me
Honestly,
monologuing.
I could go on talking about musical artists and we haven't even talked about effect pedals yet.
It's another podcast.
Oh boy.
We could go on talking about effect pedals all day long.
Just go to my channel for that stuff.
Yeah. Well, please, listeners, go to Chords of Orion.
If you're interested in effect pedals, particularly ambient effect pedals, go to Chords
If you
of
ever
Orion.
if you ever want to talk about effect pedals, we can do that, but it's probably another conversation.
Yeah. But geez, thank you so much, Bill, for coming on the show with these two
Sure.
wacky 20-year-olds.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because I had mentioned to Joe, I was like, that guy seems cool. I wonder if he'd talk to us.
Well, thanks for interviewing an old fart.
Oh,
Not at all.
no problem. So, thanks everybody for listening, and I guess we'll see you or you'll hear us when you hear us then.
You'll hear us next time. Yeah.
Secret of a happy marriage. Maybe you should write this down. You want to keep a love together? The best way is to end it now.